The Hidden Leaf village basked in the golden glow of dawn, its streets slowly stirring to life as shopkeepers opened their stalls and shinobi prepared for their daily missions. At the heart of the village stood the Hokage monument, its carved faces watching over Konoha like silent guardians. Among them, the seventh Hokage, Naruto Uzumaki, stood atop his own likeness, his piercing blue eyes scanning the horizon. Though peace had reigned for years, an unease prickled at the back of his neck, a sensation he couldn't ignore. Beside him, Sasuke Uchiha leaned against the stone, his lone arm crossed over his chest. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured, his voice low. Naruto nodded, his grip tightening on the railing. "Something's off. Like the shadows themselves are restless." Sasuke's Sharingan flickered to life, its crimson swirl scanning the village below. "The infinite Tsukuyomi's remnants. I thought we sealed them away." A sudden ripple in the air shattered the calm. From the edges of the village, dark tendrils slithered from the ground, twisting into humanoid shapes with glowing, hollow eyes. The shadowy figures moved with eerie precision, their forms shifting between solid and ethereal. Naruto's fists clenched, his chakra flaring like a blazing sun. "They're back," he growled. Without hesitation, he leapt from the monument, landing in the village square as the shadows converged. A swarm of them lunged, their claws outstretched. Naruto pivoted, his foot slamming into the ground with enough force to crack the earth. Wind style, Rasengan. A swirling sphere of chakra formed in his palm, its razor-sharp winds shredding through the first wave of shadows. But the creatures reformed almost instantly, their laughter echoing like whispers on the wind. Sasuke descended in a swirl of black flames, his Susanoo manifesting in a skeletal frame around him. The spectral warrior's sword cleaved through the shadows, but even as they dissipated, more rose from the ground. "They're drawing power from something," Sasuke muttered. His Rinnegan pulsed, warping space as he teleported behind a shadow, his Chidori spearing through its chest. Yet the wound sealed shut moments later. Naruto gritted his teeth, his whisker marks darkening as Kurama's chakra surged through him. His cloak of orange energy flared, tails lashing behind him. "If brute force isn't working, we'll have to outthink them," he called to Sasuke. The Uchiha smirked. "Took you long enough to figure that out." Their teamwork was seamless. Naruto hurled a barrage of shadow clones, each one weaving hand signs in unison. Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. The clones' combined attack engulfed the shadows in a sea of flames, forcing them to scatter. Sasuke seized the opening, his Susanoo's arrows knocking into place. Amaterasu. Black flames coated the projectiles, piercing through the shadows and pinning them to the ground. The creatures writhed, their forms flickering like dying embers. But just as victory seemed within reach, the ground trembled. A colossal shadow, twice the size of the Hokage monument, erupted from the earth, its maw gaping like a void. Naruto's eyes widened. That's not just a shadow, it's a manifestation of the Tsukuyomi's will. The beast roared, its voice a cacophony of distorted whispers, as if the dreams of 1,000 trapped souls cried out at once. Sasuke's Rinnegan spun wildly. "We need to end this fast." Naruto nodded, his body radiating with Kurama's full power. "Let's go, partner." As the two legends charged, the shadow behemoth raised a clawed hand, its strike splitting the sky. The battle for Konoha's soul had begun, and the true enemy lurked just beyond their sight. The battlefield was a chaos of shifting shadows and flickering illusions, the remnants of the infinite Tsukuyomi's collapse still warping the air like heat haze. Naruto Uzumaki stood at the center of it all, his breath ragged, his orange jacket torn from the relentless onslaught. But the worst was yet to come. His own shadows, the very extensions of his chakra, had turned against him. Dark, humanoid figures peeled away from the ground, their glowing yellow eyes mirroring his own, their movements eerily synchronized yet hostile. Sasuke's Sharingan darted between the clones, analyzing. "They're not just copying you," he muttered. "They're evolving." One shadow lashed out, its Rasengan spiraling not with blue chakra but with inky darkness, and Naruto barely twisted away in time. The attack gouged a crater into the earth, sending debris flying. Sakura's fists clenched, her medical instincts warring with her battle-ready reflexes. "If they're part of you, can't you just dispel them?" she called. Naruto gritted his teeth. "I tried. They're not responding like normal clones, it's like they've got minds of their own." His stomach twisted at the thought. Were these things really him, or something worse? Before he could dwell further, the ground trembled. A monstrous figure emerged from the forest's edge, a towering, skeletal construct wreathed in black flames. "Susanoo?" Sasuke's voice was sharp with disbelief. But this wasn't his. The armor was jagged, corrupted, its wielder hidden within the shadows. Then came the laughter, deep, familiar. Madara? Naruto spat the name like poison. But no. The figure stepped forward, and the moonlight revealed a face that made Sasuke's blood run cold. Itachi? He whispered. The figure smirked, but his eyes were wrong, hollow, consumed by the same darkness infesting Naruto's clones. Not quite, it said, voice layered with something unnatural. Though his power serves well. Sakura's mind raced. A puppet? A genjutsu? No time to theorize, the shadow Susanoo's blade came crashing down. Sasuke barely activated his own Susanoo in time, the two ethereal giants clashing in a shockwave that flattened the surrounding trees. Naruto's clones, his real ones, scattered, trying to flank, but the corrupted shadows intercepted, matching them blow for blow. Worse, the fake Itachi moved with precision no imitation should possess. His fingers wove signs, and suddenly, the sky rained fire, Amaterasu, but twisted, the flames laced with the same inky darkness. Sakura barely pulled Naruto out of the path as the black fire consumed the ground where he'd stood. We can't fight them like this, she shouted. We need a plan. Naruto's eyes narrowed. If these things fed on his chakra, maybe the answer wasn't more power, but less. Sasuke, cover me. He barked, then slammed his palms together. Instead of summoning clones, he released chakra in a massive pulse, a technique to destabilize his own energy. The shadows flickered, their forms wavering, but only for a second. Then they lunged again, faster. Sasuke cursed. They're adapting. Whatever this is, it's learning from us. His Rinnegan flared as he activated Amino Tejikara, swapping places with one of the shadows mid-strike, using its own momentum to send it crashing into another. But the fake Itachi was already countering, his Susanoo's arm morphing into a swarm of spectral crows that dove at them like daggers. Naruto rolled, forming a Rasen Shuriken, but hesitated. What if the shadows absorbed it? Before he could decide, Sakura was there, her fist slamming into the earth. The ground erupted in a protective wall of stone, intercepting the crows. Stop overthinking, she snapped. We're losing ground. Then, a new voice. Took you long enough to notice. Kakashi stood atop a crumbling pillar, his lone eye assessing the battlefield. But something was off. His stance was too rigid, his tone too cold. And when he raised his hand, lightning crackled, not his trademark Chidori, but a jagged, violet current that smelled of decay. Naruto's heart sank. Not him too. The shadows weren't just rebelling. They were replacing. And if they could mimic even Kakashi's genius, what hope did they have? The battle wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about figuring out who, or what, they could still trust. The night air crackled with residual chakra as Naruto Uzumaki staggered to his feet, his shadow stretching unnaturally long behind him. The infinite Tsukuyomi's collapse had left the world in eerie silence, but now, his own darkness writhed against him, a living entity with a will of its own. Before he could react, a kunai whistled past his ear, embedding itself in the ground with a metallic hum. TSK, TSK. The great hero, struggling against his own shadow? The voice was smooth, laced with amusement, and Naruto spun to face its owner. A figure stood atop a shattered tree stump, silhouetted against the pale moonlight. The stranger wore a cloak stitched with swirling patterns, their face half hidden behind a porcelain mask, a fox's grin painted in crimson. Sasuke's Sharingan flared as he stepped forward, his sword unsheathed. Who the hell are you? The masked figure tilted their head. Call me Kitsune. And I'm here to see if the legends live up to the hype. With a flick of their wrist, a chain of paper seals unfurled, igniting midair into a barrage of explosive tags. Naruto barely had time to shout a warning before the ground erupted in fire. Sakura's fists glowed green as she punched through the smoke, but Kitsune was already gone, reappearing behind her in a blur. A kunai aimed for her spine, but Sasuke intercepted, their blades locking with a shower of sparks. Fast, Sasuke muttered, pushing back. Kitsune chuckled, twisting their wrist to release a hidden senbone from their sleeve. Sasuke dodged, but the needle grazed his arm, and his muscles locked, paralyzing venom. Naruto roared, lunging forward with a Rasengan, but Kitsune sidestepped, their cloak flaring as they weaved hand signs. Shadows pooled at their feet, then surged upward like spears, forcing Naruto to flip backward. You're not the only one who can play with darkness, Kitsune taunted. Sakura cursed, tearing a chunk of earth to shield Sasuke as he fought the toxin. We don't have time for this. The others are still trapped in the Tsukuyomi's remnants. Kitsune's mask gleamed as they tilted their head. Ah, yes. The sleeping beauties. What if I told you I know how to wake them up? Naruto's breath hitched. What's your game? No game. Just a trade. Kitsune's voice dropped, losing its playful edge. Your shadow clones, specifically, the ones that rebelled. Hand them over, and I'll give you the key to breaking the genjutsu fully. Sasuke snarled, forcing his limbs to move despite the venom. Bullshit. You're after something else. Kitsune shrugged. Believe what you want. But every second you waste, more of your friends slip away. A tense silence followed, broken only by the distant howl of wind. Naruto's fists clenched. His shadow clones had gained independence, becoming rogue entities. Handing them over felt like betrayal. But if it meant saving everyone. Before he could decide, a new presence made itself known. The ground trembled, and from the trees emerged a towering figure clad in armor, their face obscured by a horned helmet. A massive war hammer rested on their shoulder, dented from countless battles. Enough chatter, the armored warrior boomed. Kitsune, you were supposed to retrieve the rogue shadows, not negotiate. Kitsune sighed. Always so impatient, Juggernaut. Naruto's stomach dropped. Another player. And this one radiated danger. Juggernaut swung their hammer, the force alone carving a trench in the earth. Sakura barely yanked Sasuke out of the way in time. We can't fight blind, she hissed. We need intel. Naruto gritted his teeth. Then let's get some. He formed a dozen shadow clones, all charging at once. Juggernaut didn't flinch, their hammer came down in a crushing arc, dispelling half the clones in a single blow. But Naruto had expected that. The remaining clones fainted, buying him a second to leap onto Juggernaut's back, Rasengan spinning in his palm. Before he could strike, Kitsune's chain wrapped around his ankle, yanking him off. Nice try, they mused, but he's mine to command. Sasuke, finally shaking off the venom, ignited his Susanoo skeletal arm, slamming it into Juggernaut's chest. The armored warrior skidded back but didn't fall. Instead, they grinned beneath their helmet. Finally, a challenge. The battle erupted in earnest, Sasuke's lightning clashing with Juggernaut's brute strength, Sakura's precise strikes countering Kitsune's trickery, and Naruto's clones weaving in and out, testing for weaknesses. But cohesion was slipping. Sasuke's attacks grew reckless, his pride stung by the earlier poison. Sakura's focus split between healing and fighting. And Naruto, his shadow clones were flickering, their loyalty wavering. Kitsune saw it all, their masked face unreadable. You're falling apart, they remarked, dodging Sakura's punch. And you haven't even seen the best part. With a snap of their fingers, the ground split open, and from the fissure rose a figure Naruto never expected to see again, a shadow clone, but not his. This one wore a familiar orange jacket, its eyes hollow, its grin too wide. Miss me? The clone asked in Naruto's own voice. The real Naruto froze. This wasn't just a rogue shadow. This was something worse. And with its arrival, the balance of the battle, and the fate of the Tsukuyomi's victims, tipped into chaos. The air was thick with the acrid scent of chakra, the battlefield a wasteland of shattered stone and smoldering trees. Naruto Uzumaki stood at the center of it all, his breath ragged, his orange jacket torn and singed. The infinite Tsukuyomi's glow had faded, but the nightmare it left behind was far from over. His own shadow clones, once extensions of his will, now turned against him, their eyes gleaming with an eerie, malevolent light. Why? Naruto growled, wiping blood from his lip. You're supposed to be me. The clones didn't answer. They moved in unison, a swarm of orange and gold, their movements too precise, too coordinated. Something was controlling them. Something worse than he'd imagined. Sasuke's Sharingan spun wildly as he parried a clone's kunai, his sword flashing in a deadly arc. They're not just rebelling, Naruto, he hissed. They're being puppeteered. There's a genjutsu layered beneath the Tsukuyomi's remnants. Naruto's stomach twisted. If even his shadows could be turned against him, what hope did they have? Then came the laughter, a cold, mocking sound that slithered through the ruins. From the darkness emerged a figure cloaked in tattered black, their face obscured by a mask of cracked porcelain. You always rely too much on your clones, Naruto Uzumaki, the voice taunted. Did you really think they were just tools? They have wills of their own. And now, they've chosen me. Naruto's fists clenched. Who the hell are you? The figure tilted their head. A remnant you forgot. A shadow you cast aside. With a flick of their wrist, the clones surged forward, their attacks synchronized like a deadly dance. Naruto barely dodged a Rasengan aimed at his ribs, the impact sending shockwaves through the ground. He retaliated with a spinning kick, but another clone intercepted, their fists slamming into his gut. The air rushed from his lungs as he skidded backward, pain flaring through his body. Sakura's voice cut through the chaos. "Naruto, hold on." She lunged, her fist cratering the earth where the clones had stood, but they scattered like leaves in a storm. One of them lashed out with a chakra-infused blade, slicing her arm. She gritted her teeth, green healing light flickering around the wound, but the clones didn't give her time to recover. Sasuke's Rinnegan flared as he activated Amino Tejikara, swapping places with Naruto in a blur of motion. His Chidori screeched, piercing through 2 clones in a burst of lightning. But for every one that fell, 3 more took its place. "We can't keep this up," Sasuke muttered. Naruto's mind raced. If this enemy could turn his own power against him, brute force wouldn't work. He needed to outthink them. Then it hit him, the clones weren't just being controlled. They were being fed. The enemy was siphoning their chakra, using it to fuel their assault. If he cut off the source. Kurama. Naruto reached inward, the 9 tails growl resonating in his mind. "Took you long enough," the fox grumbled, but his chakra surged forth, cloaking Naruto in a fiery mantle. With a roar, Naruto unleashed a massive Rasen Shuriken, not at the clones, but at the ground beneath them. The earth erupted in a storm of wind and debris, disrupting the enemy's chakra threads. For a split second, the clones faltered, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. The masked figure staggered, their mask cracking further. "Clever," they sneered. But not enough. They raised a hand, and the shadows around them writhed, coalescing into monstrous shapes, twisted versions of Naruto's past foes. Gaara's sand hissed like a living thing, Pain's Rinnegan eyes glowed ominously, even Madara's silhouette loomed with crushing presence. Naruto's blood ran cold. This wasn't just an attack on his body, it was an assault on his soul. Every doubt, every failure, every face he couldn't save was being weaponized against him. His breath hitched. He could feel Kurama's unease. "This one's playing dirty," the fox growled. Sasuke's voice was sharp. "Naruto, snap out of it. They're illusions." But they felt real. Gaara's sand wrapped around his legs, crushing. Pain's gravity pressed down, threatening to flatten him. Madara's laughter echoed, promising endless despair. Naruto's vision blurred. Was this it? After everything, would he fall to his own demons? Then, a hand on his shoulder. Warm. Steady. He turned to see Hinata, her Byakugan burning with determination. "I'm here," she whispered. Her gentle chakra pulsed through him, a lifeline in the storm. "We all are." Something inside Naruto cracked, not with weakness, but with resolve. He wasn't alone. He'd never been alone. With a roar, he channeled Kurama's chakra outward, a golden wave obliterating the illusions. The masked figure recoiled, their control slipping. Impossible. Naruto didn't give them time to recover. He lunged, his fist connecting with the mask, shattering it completely. The face beneath made his heart stop. It was him. A twisted reflection, eyes hollow, smile venomous. "Surprised?" The other Naruto sneered. "I'm what you could have been. What you almost were." The truth slammed into Naruto like a physical blow. This wasn't an enemy. This was his own darkness, given form, given voice. The infinite Tsukuyomi hadn't just shown dreams. It had given nightmares life. And now, Naruto had to face the one foe he could never outrun, himself. The battle wasn't just for the world anymore. It was for his soul. The battlefield was a storm of chakra and desperation. Naruto Uzumaki skidded backward, his sandals carving furrows into the cracked earth as his own shadow clones, now twisted by the infinite Tsukuyomi's corruption, lunged at him with kunai gleaming under the fractured moonlight. His breath came ragged, not from exhaustion, but from the sickening realization that his own power had turned against him. "Damn it," he growled, barely dodging a swipe aimed for his throat. "How do we fight ourselves?" Sasuke's Sharingan flared as he parried a strike from his own doppelganger, the clash of blades sending sparks into the air. "We don't," he snapped. "We outthink them." His Rinnegan pulsed, and in a flash, he swapped places with a nearby boulder, leaving his shadow stumbling mid-swing. But the reprieve was short-lived. More clones emerged from the swirling mist, their eyes empty yet burning with borrowed malice. Nearby, Sakura's fists cratered the ground as she pivoted, her medical ninjutsu flaring to heal a gash on her arm before it could slow her down. "They're adapting," she shouted over the din. "Every move we make, they counter faster." A clone lashed out with a Rasengan, and she barely intercepted it with a chakra-enhanced punch, the force of the collision sending shockwaves through the ruined landscape. The air itself seemed to rebel, trees uprooted by errant jutsu crashed around them, and the ground trembled as if the world resented their defiance. Naruto gritted his teeth. We need a new plan. Fast. His mind raced. The infinite Tsukuyomi's hold was weakening, but their shadows weren't just copies, they were evolving, learning from every failed attack. Kakashi materialized beside them, his mask hiding the strain in his voice. They're drawing on our memories, our instincts. The more we fight, the stronger they get. He flung a volley of shuriken, only for his shadow to deflect them with identical precision. We can't win head on. A desperate idea sparked in Naruto's eyes. Then we stop fighting like us. He turned to Sasuke. Remember that dumb trick we tried as kids? The one that nearly blew up the training ground? Sasuke's lip curled, but there was no time for pride. TCH. It might work. Without another word, they broke apart, Naruto weaving hand signs while Sasuke's Rinnegan flared. The shadows mimicked them perfectly, until Naruto abruptly cancelled his jutsu mid-sequence, and Sasuke teleported behind his own clone, driving a Chidori into its back. The corrupted clone spasmed, its form flickering as the conflicting signals tore at its borrowed consciousness. It wasn't enough. More shadows surged forward, their movements now erratic, as if the Tsukuyomi itself was struggling to maintain control. But the cracks were showing. Sakura seized the opening. Now! She slammed her fist into the earth, splitting the terrain with monstrous force. The shadows staggered as the ground gave way beneath them, some vanishing in bursts of smoke as their footing dissolved. Kakashi's lightning clone feinted left, then struck right, exploiting the chaos to land a decisive blow. But the victory was hollow. In the distance, the sky pulsed with ominous light, that Tsukuyomi's core, a swirling maelstrom of genjutsu, was reforming. Stronger. We're running out of time, Sasuke muttered. If that thing finishes recalibrating, we lose everything. Naruto wiped blood from his lip, his gaze hardening. Then we hit it before it's ready. He turned to the others, his voice raw but unwavering. We go all out. No holding back. Even if it kills us. The others nodded. There was no other choice. As they charged toward the heart of the storm, the shadows howled behind them, the world itself seeming to fracture under the weight of their resolve. The final battle had begun. The battlefield trembled as Naruto Uzumaki skidded backward, his feet carving deep furrows into the cracked earth. His own shadows, once extensions of his will, twisted against him, their inky forms writhing with malice. The infinite Tsukuyomi's remnants flickered overhead, a fractured dreamscape on the verge of collapse. Across from him, his shadow clone, now a monstrous entity of darkness, grinned with jagged teeth. You can't win, it hissed, its voice a warped echo of Naruto's own. I am you, every doubt, every fear you've ever buried. Naruto wiped blood from his lip, his breath ragged but his eyes burning with defiance. Yeah, well, I've beaten worse. With a roar, he lunged, golden chakra erupting around him in a swirling tempest. His shadow mirrored the movement, their fists colliding in a shockwave that shattered the ground beneath them. The impact sent debris hurtling skyward, but neither flinched. Naruto twisted midair, swinging a leg in a vicious arc, but his shadow anticipated it, ducking low and retaliating with a palm strike to his ribs. The blow sent Naruto skidding again, but he recovered instantly, channeling Kurama's chakra to mend the damage. Nearby, Sasuke Uchiha danced through a storm of his own shadows, his Sharingan spinning furiously. His dark counterpart moved with eerie precision, matching his every strike, every feint. Predictable, the shadow sneered, catching Sasuke's wrist mid-swing. Sasuke smirked. Am I? His Rinnegan flared, and in an instant, he swapped places with a nearby boulder. The shadow's grip closed on empty air, and Sasuke reappeared above it, Chidori screeching in his palm. He drove it downward, only for the shadow to dissolve into smoke, reforming behind him with a kunai aimed at his spine. Sasuke barely dodged, the blade grazing his side, but he retaliated with a sweeping kick, forcing the shadow back. Sakura Haruno wasn't faring much better. Her shadow had her same monstrous strength, every punch cratering the earth. They traded blows at blinding speed, each impact sending shockwaves through the air. Sakura's fists glowed green with healing chakra, mending her fractures mid-battle, but her shadow did the same. You're just a copy. Sakura snarled, fainting left before driving her fist into the shadow's gut. It coughed black mist but grinned, grabbing her arm and hurling her into a cliffside. Rock shattered as she pushed through the pain, leaping back into the fray with a battle cry. The allied shinobi forces weren't idle either. Shikamaru's shadow jutsu clashed with his doppelgangers in a battle of wits, their strategies canceling each other out. TCH. Annoying, Shikamaru muttered, but his mind raced. He needed a new angle, something his shadow wouldn't see coming. Nearby, Ino's mind transfer jutsu fizzled as her shadow countered with the same technique, their consciousnesses briefly intertwining in a dizzying mental duel. You can't outthink yourself. Her shadow taunted. Ino gritted her teeth. Watch me. The tide of battle shifted when Naruto, panting but grinning, suddenly spread his arms wide. All right, enough playing around. His shadow paused, tilting its head. Foolish. You have nothing left. Naruto's grin widened. Wrong. With a thunderous clap, he summoned a dozen shadow clones, but these weren't ordinary. Each one blazed with Kurama's chakra, their auras merging into a swirling maelstrom. The shadow's eyes widened. Impossible. Naruto didn't give it time to react. The clones surged forward, a golden tsunami of fists and feet, overwhelming the shadow with sheer force. It tried to counter, but Naruto's unpredictability, his trademark recklessness, threw it off. A clone fainted high while the real Naruto came from below, his Rasengan slamming into the shadow's chest. The dark form screeched as it was blasted apart, its form dissolving into wisps of smoke. Sasuke saw his opening. His shadow, momentarily distracted by Naruto's victory, left an opening. Sasuke's Rinnegan pulsed, and he unleashed Amaterasu, black flames engulfing his doppelganger. The shadow howled, but Sasuke wasn't done. With a swift hand seal, he combined the flames with Kagetsuchi, shaping them into a searing spear. He hurled it, the weapon piercing the shadow's core. It staggered, then exploded into darkness. Sakura, battered but unbroken, saw her chance. Her shadow hesitated, sensing the shift in the battle. No more holding back, Sakura whispered. She charged, her fist wreathed in chakra so dense it crackled like lightning. The shadow braced itself, but Sakura's punch wasn't aimed at it, she struck the ground. The earth upheaved, a cataclysmic shockwave hurling the shadow into the air. Before it could recover, Sakura was there, her foot connecting with its chin in a devastating uppercut. The shadow's head snapped back, its body disintegrating mid-flight. With their leaders triumphant, the remaining shadows wavered. Shikamaru finally outmaneuvered his, ensnaring it in a complex web of shadows before crushing it with a decisive clap. Ino, seizing the moment, launched a mental assault so fierce her shadow's psyche shattered. One by one, the dark reflections fell, their forms dissipating like smoke in the wind. But the victory was short-lived. The sky above them groaned, the infinite Tsukuyomi's remnants fracturing further. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura regrouped, their faces grim. It's not over, Sasuke muttered. Naruto nodded. The real fight's just starting. Sakura cracked her knuckles. Then let's finish it. As the world trembled on the brink of collapse, the trio charged forward, their resolve unshaken. The final battle awaited, and they were ready. The battlefield trembled as Naruto Uzumaki skidded backward, his arms trembling from the force of his own shadow clones turning against him. The infinite Tsukuyomi's hold had fractured, but its remnants still twisted the wills of even his closest allies. Now, his very own chakra constructs had become his enemies. Kurama's growl echoed in his mind, "This is madness, Naruto. They're using your power against you." Naruto gritted his teeth, his blue eyes blazing with determination. "Then I'll just have to push harder." He surged forward, his Rasengan spiraling in his palm, only for a dozen shadow clones to intercept him, their attacks mirroring his own. The clash sent shockwaves through the air, dust and debris scattering as the clones fought with his own relentless ferocity. Sasuke's voice cut through the chaos, his Sharingan spinning wildly. "Naruto, they're adapting." He lunged, his sword flashing as he carved through the clones, but for every one he felled, two more surged from Naruto's flickering chakra. The Uchiha's breath came ragged, even his eternal Mangekyo was struggling to keep up. Sakura's fists cratered the ground as she smashed through another wave, her medical chakra flaring to heal her battered knuckles. "We can't keep this up forever," she shouted. "We need to break the link." Above them, the shattered sky of the infinite Tsukuyomi pulsed, its fractured light casting eerie shadows. Madara's laughter reverberated, distant yet suffocating. "You fight yourselves more than you fight me," his voice taunted. "Your bonds are your weakness." Naruto's heart pounded. "No, our bonds are our strength." He reached deep, feeling the flicker of every ally who had ever stood beside him. The Kyuubi's chakra roared to life, a crimson cloak erupting around him as he unleashed a devastating whirlwind of attacks, his clones dissolving under the sheer force of his resolve. Sasuke seized the opening, his Rinnegan flaring. Now! Amaterasu's black flames erupted, consuming the remnants of the rebellious shadows. The two warriors moved in perfect sync, their rivalry forged into unbreakable unity. But Madara was not done. The earth split as the 10 tails remnant surged upward, its monstrous form writhing with stolen chakra. "You've only delayed the inevitable," he sneered, his own shadow stretching, twisting into something darker. Naruto and Sasuke exchanged a glance, no words needed. This was the moment. With a final, desperate surge, they charged, their combined power tearing through the battlefield like a storm. The impact shook the world, light and darkness colliding in a cataclysm that forced even the heavens to recoil. As the dust settled, Madara staggered, his form flickering. The infinite Tsukuyomi's grip wavered further, its illusion cracking. But Naruto knew, this wasn't over. Not yet. Breathing hard, he clenched his fist, feeling the weight of every sacrifice. "We're not stopping here," he vowed. The final battle was still ahead. The air hung heavy with the scent of charred earth and spent chakra, the remnants of the infinite Tsukuyomi's collapse still flickering like dying embers in the sky. Naruto Uzumaki knelt in the dirt, his breath ragged, his orange jacket torn and singed from the battle. Around him, the allied shinobi forces staggered, their faces etched with exhaustion and disbelief. They had won, or so they thought. The genjutsu was broken, the world freed from Madara's twisted dream. But as the dust settled, a new dread coiled in Naruto's gut. His shadow stretched unnaturally long in the fading light, twitching as if alive. Then, without warning, it lurched forward, not as a flat silhouette, but as a three-dimensional entity, its inky fingers wrapping around his ankle. Naruto yelped, yanking his leg free, but the shadow only grinned, its hollow eyes gleaming with malice. Across the battlefield, others cried out as their own shadows writhed, detaching from their bodies and rising like specters. "What the hell is this?" Sasuke snarled, his Sharingan spinning as he backed away from his own creeping shadow. Kurama's voice growled in Naruto's mind. "This isn't just a genjutsu remnant. Your shadows have been corrupted, tainted by the Tsukuyomi's backlash." Before Naruto could respond, his shadow lunged, a blade of darkness forming in its grip. He barely dodged, rolling aside as the weapon sliced through the air where his head had been. The other shinobi weren't faring much better. Sakura's shadow mimicked her monstrous strength, shattering the ground with each punch, while Gaara sent waves of black sand surging toward him. "We can't fight ourselves," Shikamaru shouted, his usual calm fraying as his shadow's intellect matched his own, countering every move before he made it. Naruto gritted his teeth. If their shadows knew their every tactic, they needed something unpredictable. He formed a Rasengan, but his shadow mirrored the motion, creating an identical sphere of swirling darkness. The two attacks collided, canceling each other out in a burst of energy. "Think outside the box." Sasuke barked, his Rinnegan flaring as he summoned a hawk to distract his shadow. The creature screeched, diving at the inky doppelganger, buying Sasuke a precious second to strike with a Chidori, only for the shadow to phase through it, reforming unharmed. Naruto's mind raced. If their shadows were extensions of their own chakra, maybe they could exploit that connection. He reached out with his senses, feeling the familiar pulse of his own energy within the shadow. But there was something else, too, a foreign presence, like a parasite latched onto his chakra. "They're not just copies," he realized aloud. "Something's controlling them." Just then, a guttural laugh echoed across the battlefield. From the fissures in the earth, a figure emerged, cloaked in tattered robes, his face obscured by a mask of cracked porcelain. His voice was a rasp, dripping with amusement. "Clever, Uzumaki. But not clever enough." The shinobi tensed. This wasn't Madara. This wasn't Kaguya. This was someone, or something, new. The masked man raised a hand, and the shadows surged with renewed vigor, their movements no longer mere imitations but coordinated assaults. Naruto's shadow split into three, each wielding a different weapon. Sasuke's sprouted wings of darkness, soaring overhead to rain down kunai. The battlefield became a nightmare of shifting alliances and frantic dodges. Exhaustion weighed on Naruto's limbs, but he forced himself forward. If they couldn't overpower their shadows, they had to outsmart them. He glanced at Shikamaru, who was barely holding his own. "Shikamaru. The environment, use it." Understanding flashed in Shikamaru's eyes. He feinted left, then hurled an explosive tag at a nearby cliffside. The detonation sent boulders crashing down, crushing his shadow beneath the rubble. It screeched, struggling to reform, but the weight of the rocks pinned it long enough for Shikamaru to bind it with his clan's shadow stitching technique. Naruto grinned. That was it. They didn't need brute force, they needed the terrain. He kicked off the ground, leading his shadows toward a riverbank. At the last second, he formed a massive Rasen shuriken and hurled it into the water. The resulting explosion sent a tidal wave crashing over the shadows, their forms dissolving momentarily in the churning currents. But the masked man only chuckled. Adorable. With a snap of his fingers, the shadows solidified again, their bodies now shimmering with an eerie, liquid darkness. They moved faster, stronger, adapting. Sasuke wiped blood from his lip, his Sharingan tracking the masked man's movements. He's the source. Take him down, the shadows fall. Naruto nodded. They had one shot. He and Sasuke charged in unison, Naruto weaving through shadow clones to confuse the enemy while Sasuke teleported behind the masked man with his Rinnegan. Their attacks connected, Naruto's fist blazing with Kurama's chakra, Sasuke's sword gleaming, only to pass straight through the figure as if he were made of smoke. The masked man reappeared a dozen yards away, his laughter grating. You can't kill what was never alive. The shadows closed in, their attacks relentless. Naruto felt a blade graze his side, hot pain flaring. They were losing. Then, a voice cut through the chaos. Naruto. The light. It was Hinata, her Byakugan active, pointing at the fractured sky where the last remnants of the Tsukuyomi's moon still glowed faintly. Naruto's eyes widened. The shadows were born from darkness, but light was their weakness. Everyone. Aim for the moon, he shouted. The shinobi rallied, channeling their remaining chakra into one collective assault. Fire, lightning, wind, all of it surged upward in a brilliant cascade, striking the moon's remnants. The explosion of light was blinding, washing over the battlefield like a dawn after a long night. The shadows shrieked, their forms unraveling into wisps of smoke. The masked man staggered, his porcelain mask cracking as the light seared through him. No. This wasn't part of the plan. Then, with a final, agonized wail, he dissolved into nothing. Silence fell. The shadows were gone. The shinobi collapsed where they stood, too drained to celebrate. Naruto panted, his vision swimming. They'd won, again. But as he looked at the empty space where the masked man had been, a cold certainty settled over him. This wasn't over. And the next enemy would be worse. The world trembled as the infinite Tsukuyomi's grip shattered, its golden light fracturing like broken glass. Naruto staggered, his breath ragged, the weight of the battle pressing down on him. But before he could steady himself, a new horror unfolded, his own shadows, once extensions of his will, twisted and writhed against him, slithering free from his control. Dark figures rose from the ground, their shapes mirroring his own, their eyes gleaming with malice. What the hell? He spat, backpedaling as one lunged, its fist crashing into his ribs. Pain flared, but worse was the realization, these weren't just clones. They were his own chakra, his own power, turned traitor. Sasuke's Sharingan flared, his blade slicing through a shadowy mimic of himself. They're using our techniques against us, he growled. Nearby, Sakura barely dodged a crushing blow from her own doppelganger, the ground cracking under the force. We can't keep this up, she shouted, sweat streaking her face. The others weren't faring any better. Kakashi's lightning fizzled against a shadow copy, while Gaara's sand was ensnared by a dark replica of his own defenses. The battlefield had become a nightmare of reflections, each more vicious than the last. Naruto gritted his teeth. We need a plan. Now. His mind raced, but exhaustion clouded his thoughts. Then, a voice cut through the chaos, Shikamaru, panting as he pinned his own shadow with a kunai. They're connected to us, he gasped. Our chakra, our movements. They're reacting, not thinking. His eyes narrowed. If we disrupt that link, even for a second, we can turn this around. Kakashi wiped blood from his brow. How? They're literally us. Shikamaru's gaze flicked to Naruto. We overload them. Flood the field with so much conflicting chakra they can't adapt. A risky gamble, one wrong move, and they'd drain themselves dry. But the alternative was unthinkable. Naruto nodded. Then we go all out. Every last bit. He turned to the others, their faces grim but determined. Sasuke, Sakura, hit them with everything you've got. Kakashi-sensei, Gaara, cover our flanks. Shikamaru, you're the anchor. The second they falter, we strike as one. No room for hesitation. No room for failure. The fight erupted anew. Naruto surged forward, Rasengan blazing in his palm, only for his shadow to meet him with an identical spiral. The impact sent shockwaves through the air, but he didn't let up, channeling more chakra, pushing harder. Sasuke's Susanoo clashed with its dark twin, swords locking in a screech of energy, while Sakura's fists shattered the earth, forcing her mimic to retreat. Kakashi's Kamui flickered, warping space itself, but his shadow countered with the same technique, the void twisting unpredictably. Gaara's sand roared like a tidal wave, only to be swallowed by an inky replica. Damn it! He snarled, but Shikamaru was already moving, his shadow stitching technique lashing out, tangling their foes for a split second. Now! He barked. Naruto didn't hesitate. He slammed his hands together, summoning every ounce of Kurama's power. Baijuu Bomb. The orb of condensed energy swelled, but instead of firing it, he hurled it upward, a signal. Sasuke's Amaterasu flames erupted in a black inferno, Sakura's chakra-enhanced punch cratered the ground, and Kakashi's lightning split the sky. The combined assault was deafening, the very air screaming in protest. For a heartbeat, the shadows wavered, their forms flickering like candle flames in a storm. That was all they needed. Naruto lunged, his fist connecting with his doppelganger's jaw, the impact fueled by months of war, of loss, of unyielding resolve. The shadow shattered like glass, dissolving into mist. Around him, the others pressed their advantage. Sasuke's blade found its mark, Sakura's kick sent her mimic flying, and Gaara's sand speared through the last of the twisted reflections. Silence fell, heavy and thick. The team stood battered but unbroken, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Did we do it? Sakura whispered. But Naruto's gut twisted. The ground beneath them trembled, cracked spider-webbing outward. A low, guttural laugh echoed from the darkness. Fools, a voice sneered, one that sent ice down their spines. From the abyss, a figure emerged, its form shifting, its eyes burning with familiar, hateful light. Did you really think it would be that easy? Madara Uchiha stepped into the ruin of their battle, his smirk sharp as a blade. And behind him, the shadows stirred once more. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. Word count, 2000. The battlefield trembled as Naruto Uzumaki stood alone, his breath ragged, his shadow stretching unnaturally long behind him, except it wasn't just a shadow anymore. It twisted, writhed, and then rose, a pitch-black doppelganger with glowing crimson eyes. You've relied on us too long, it hissed, its voice a distorted echo of his own. Around him, the other shadows of the allied shinobi forces slithered free, turning on their masters. The infinite Tsukuyomi's remnants had fractured reality, and now the darkness itself had become the enemy. Sasuke's Sharingan blazed as his own shadow lunged at him, mimicking his every move. TCH. Annoying, he muttered, weaving hand signs. Amaterasu. Black flames engulfed the shadow, but it simply laughed, the fire absorbed into its form. You can't burn darkness, Uchiha, it taunted. Naruto gritted his teeth, forming a Rasengan in each hand. We need a new plan, now. Sakura's fists crackled with chakra as she smashed her shadow into the ground, only for it to reform instantly. They're adapting, she shouted. Kakashi, his mask hiding his exhaustion, analyzed the situation. They're manifestations of our own doubts and fears. We have to outthink them. Shikamaru, panting, forced his shadow to a standstill with his own technique. Easier said than done. They know our moves before we make them. The shadows grew bolder, their attacks relentless. Naruto's clone lashed out with a tailed beast bomb, but his shadow countered with an identical blast, the explosions rocking the earth. Damn it! Naruto growled. If we can't overpower them. Sasuke's Rinnegan flickered. Then we trap them. All of them. His gaze met Naruto's, and understanding passed between them. With a nod, Naruto unleashed Kurama's full power, golden chakra erupting around him. Let's go, Sasuke, he roared, charging forward. Sasuke teleported behind the shadows, his Susanoo sword gleaming. Now! Naruto hurled a massive Rasen Shuriken, and Sasuke sliced through space with a Mino Tejikara, redirecting the attack into a swirling vortex. The shadows shrieked as the force sucked them inward, their forms destabilizing. But Naruto's shadow resisted, claws digging into the ground. You can't erase us. It snarled. Naruto's eyes hardened. Maybe not. But I can face you. He stepped forward, dropping his defenses. The shadow lunged, its blade piercing his shoulder, but Naruto didn't flinch. I know you're part of me, he said, blood dripping. The doubts, the fear. But I won't run anymore. His hand clamped onto the shadow's wrist. And I won't let you control me. A surge of light erupted from his palm, the seal of the Sage of Six Paths flaring to life. The shadow screamed as pure chakra purged its malice, dissolving into wisps of smoke. Around the battlefield, the other shadows faltered, their ties severed. One by one, they vanished, leaving the shinobi gasping but victorious. Silence fell. The sky, once fractured by the infinite Tsukuyomi, began to clear. Hinata collapsed to her knees, tears streaming. It's over? Neiji's ghostly hand seemed to brush her shoulder before fading. Naruto staggered, Sasuke catching him before he fell. Idiot, Sasuke muttered, but there was no bite in it. Sakura rushed to them, healing chakra already flaring. You two never make it easy, she scolded, voice thick with relief. Kakashi surveyed the shattered land, the remnants of their battle. The world's changed, he said quietly. Shikamaru sighed, rubbing his temples. Yeah. And we've got a lot of work ahead. But for the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope. Naruto grinned weakly, raising a fist. Then let's get to it. Sasuke scoffed but bumped his knuckles against Naruto's. Around them, the survivors cheered, the sound echoing into the dawn. The shadows were gone. The future was theirs to shape. And as the sun rose, Naruto knew, this was only the beginning. Word count, 2000.